going to go ahead and get started. Professor Bogues is going to welcome everyone, and then we'll go through some logistical matters, and then people can still continue to eat. We'll start on time for the first panel. So, Professor Bogues.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Anthony Bogues. I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice and a professor of Africana Studies here at Brown University. And it really gives me enormous pleasure to welcome all of you here to this first symposium hosted by the Center for Slavery and Justice, the first graduate symposium. The way we see this is that we are not a center that like to have big meetings. Sometimes we have big events like last night. But we like to have really small scholarly conversations where people can have time to speak to each other, to exchange ideas, to critique each other, and to learn and grow intellectually. My experience in the American Academy is that when we all go to the big conferences, we put it on our CVs, which we must, so we can be tenured and so on and so forth. But that it becomes very much a fun affair after we've been to the panels that we want to go to, and know very little, except a few papers, do we get a chance or an opportunity to actually have conversations with each other. And so we like to prefer a small kind of much more reduced, if you wish, almost intimate set of conversations with style of things, which we think are much more productive. So I would like to welcome you all to our very first graduate student colloquium. We hope to make this a regular affair. I don't want to say annual, but a regular affair. And I think we can make it a regular affair if we have people like Michael Sawyer. And therefore, I would just like to say that how the center really appreciates the work of Michael Sawyer, who put this together. So please. Part of the business of trying to have conversations is really to see how we can develop networks. Networks become very important, not just in terms of mentoring or trying to get jobs later on, and all those things are very important. But networks also become important in terms of ideas. Clusters of people who may be working together in similar fields, or who might be working in disparate fields, but whose a conversation may actually be important. So one of the things I'm hoping is that after this we may be able to develop some kind of graduate student network of people who are thinking around some of these issues, and that network will last. And I would say to Michael that if you all have a network and want to do web pages or blogs or whatever it is, then the Center for Study of Slavery and Justice stand ready to make some financial contribution so that can happen. I put that on the table, so if that's all what you all want to do, then let us know. All right, the topic for this is, or the theme is slave, citizen, and human. And the way it is constructed, obviously, is really trying to think about a set of relationships between those who were enslaved and those who then, from enslavement, moved to citizenship, and then the question of the human as a kind of overarching question of this relationship. And so these are some of the things that you will obviously tease out in your papers, which I've looked at between the day before and last night. I think, though, in trying to think through this particular conundrum and its relationships, not just of the words, but obviously of the ideas and the practices of being a slave and the practices what does it mean to be a citizen, and then obviously the practices of the human, that there are a couple of things that might be useful for us. One, obviously, is the French Revolution, where the notion of citizen emerges. And then the other one is, quite frankly, the Haitian Revolution, where a notion of citizen emerges, but also emerges in a particular context where there is no understanding, if you wish, or no grounding that this citizenship is so special that it excludes people. And the point I'm making here is that there's a way in which the notion of citizen, as it emerges, particularly in the French Revolution, is an exclusionary one. Not only does it exclude slaves, women, Jews, and gypsies, but it is also one that actually defines questions of citizenship as essentially being French. In other words, that you are a citizen if you are French. And that, I think, becomes very problematic, because what then happens is that rights are accrued to citizenship. So if rights are accrued to citizenship and you are only French, then it is probably what happens if you are not French. But I think to tie slave, citizen, and human, that there is a transitory concept that we might want to put in this, and that is the transitory concept of a subject. Because move from slave to citizenship doesn't quite happen. What happens is that people move from slave to subject. And then from being a subject, then you might be a citizen. And I think that, if you wish, four-cornered set of relationships, slave, subject, citizen, and then human, is something that we might actually want to tease out. So that, for example, to think of the emancipation processes in the Caribbean is to think of a situation in which those who were enslaved in a colonial sense, in a colonial context, then became subjects after 1838, and were subjects right up until political independence in the 1960s. And so that one of the things about the colonial state was, therefore, how now do we treat these people who were former slaves, not as slaves but as subjects, but they are not yet citizens. And if you read a lot of the political philosophy and political thinking and political and social and historical thinking, quite frankly, and colonial policy thinking of the period, some of it coming out of Oxford University, you will see that that is one of the conundrums. And that conundrum was also very much tied to a certain way in which people were thinking about colonial policy in India. In our country, in the United States, there was a similar thing, not as clear-cut, because after emancipation, the only persons who got citizenship, and one of the elements of citizenship, that is the right to vote, were black males. So black women were not citizens, which means that they were subjects. They were no longer slaves. So, okay, what does that mean, therefore, for questions of civic actions, for a certain kind of subjectivities, for certain kinds of ways in which black women, after emancipation in this country, were now trying to think about themselves? And then also, what did it mean later on once racial terror began to happen and the rollback against what the boys would call black reconstruction occurred, and the installation of Jim Crow and segregation. So all of those things were about trying to deal with citizenship for black males, but were also trying to put back the subjects who were black women in a particular position. And I think for the work of Ida B. Wells in this regard is something that is very important that one might want to think about. Now, these matters may seem to be like historical matters, but I would want to suggest to you that they are not simply historical matters, but they are actually, let me use a word that we don't like to use in the academy, influenced as we are by post-structuralism and sometimes by Derrida and deconstructionism. They are foundational matters. There are matters that are foundational. I think in spite of what some people may think, that there's no kind of foundation and there's a kind of relativism to foundation. I would argue that they are foundational matters, and let me put that therefore in quotation marks. That the question of subjects and who's a subject is a foundational matter. The question of a citizenship is a foundational matter. And the question of being human and what does it mean to be human is a foundational matter. That you can't think about immigration policy in the United States without not thinking about these issues. You can't think about questions of war and conflict without thinking about questions of subjects and citizens and being human. All these things which seem to be like old historical cant that we just have to, like we are regurgitated, are really central issues. Because what they revolve around, I would argue, is a set of conceptions about what does it mean to be human and what kind of quote-unquote rights accrue to those of human, and whether or not those rights accrue to us because we are human, or accrue to us because we are subjects, or accrue to us just because we are citizens. So what is the way in which certain rights as humans are in fact should not be violated just because we are human, as opposed to whether or not we're a subject or we're a citizen. And when we think about rights, for example, what precisely do we mean? And how can we, rights itself is a very slippery, if you wish, kind of political category these days. So, but what precisely do we mean, and how can we construct a notion of rights that, if you wish, is robust enough to enhance and to welcome and to be inclusive? Is it just a notion of hospitality, a la Kant, a la Derrida, or is the hospitality really not enough? In other words, I really hope you be hospitable to me, and if I'm a guest and so on. But hospitality doesn't have a permanency to it, and hospitality, in fact, just puts us in a position of really treating somebody like an other, rather than trying to think about the way I like to put it, how you treat people as another, A-N-O-T-H-E-R rather than O-T-H-E-R. And if one begins to think about another, and therefore the questions of being human, and I think a more robust way of thinking about rights. So that to think about the questions of slavery and right and human is not just a historical question. It's really a profound question about today. And that is because I would want to argue that there's a way in which the questions of slavery and indeed of colonial power, I can't leave that out, I come from the Caribbean, is questions of slavery and colonial power are foundational, to use that phrase again, to the modern world. You can't think about the creation of the modern world without not thinking about racial slavery, without not thinking about the colonial empires. You simply can't. And to do so, in my view, is to elide not just history and have wrong, inaccurate historiography, but is to miss a kind of ways in which what I like to call sedimented traces haunt us. There's a way in which, quite frankly, history is about an engagement with time, our humans' engagement with time. And if history is about that kind of human engagement with time, then one of the questions that happens is, okay, that time is not linear or cyclical, but what happens when the deposits in time are still there? And what happens when these deposits, if you wish, carry through? So those are my kind of open remarks. I love all the papers I've seen. I hope we can have what I like to call frank quarrels without fisticuffs, right? No fisticuffs, but robust arguments, but also done very politely. And all those things may seem contradiction. But I think that it is possible to actually have arguments about ideas in terms that are not ad hominem, that does not, critique the person, but really are engaged with the person's ideas. And I think that that's a kind of style that we might want to think about. So I hope that this really becomes very, very productive. I welcome you all to Brown University. You can consider the Center for Slavery and Justice as your second home, if you wish, if you want to come all the time if you're nearby, to do our activities, if you want to talk to us here and so on, please, there's a lady called Miss Weinberg who is the anchor. All you have to do is touch bases with her, and she will let us know. And then there was our newest staff member, Ruth, who has just joined us this week was really thrown into the deep end with all the activities that we're having. Again, I'm sure that she will join the team in the way that, and work in the way that we all like to work. My final thing about welcome is that I really would like to urge you all to visit the exhibition Ships of Bondage. It's down the road kind of things, about 7 minutes walk down the road, so you can stretch your legs after sitting all morning. And it's an exhibition that I think you'd like to see. So it's the very first exhibition at the center. And it is one of the things that the center will do, which I will end with, is that we see ourselves as having both a scholarly mission, which is things like this, more conversations, networking, and so on, trying to really work with graduate students, so on, and postdocs. And we have postdocs. We have one, and then we'll have 2 next year, and 3. So so you're welcome to apply and so on. But also, I think one of the things we want to do is to engage what I call do a public history, what I like to call a public curriculum. And in that public curriculum, the question of the visual becomes very, very important. That public curriculum we do through our exhibitions. And we will have one every year. This one is, the first one, Ships of Bondage. The next one is, we're not quite sure yet. I think it will be on questions of emancipation. We're negotiating right now some images and so on. And then, we will do, or we hope to have in 2015, somewhere, a major international exhibition working with curators all over the world on slavery for 215. So, that's how, for us, this public curriculum is really critical, because I'm of the particular view that such a foundational issue really should not be closed up in the academy, but really should be the yeast, if you wish, for as much public discussion as possible. So thank you all very, very much for coming. I hope you have a successful 2 days, and I look forward to being with you most of the time. I can't be here all the time. This is also Parents and Black Alumni Weekend. And those of us, if you know anybody who has to run something, that this is a weekend also when they have to make network. So I'll be in and out, but I'll be here most of this morning. And then I'm going to have dinner with you all tonight at the Faculty Club. All right? So that has been organized. So if I don't see you in the afternoon, I'll see you later tonight. Okay? So thank you all very much.
Okay, thanks, Professor Bogues. Just a couple of quick remarks. I mean, this is a really big and important event for us, right? Both from the perspective of Africana Studies, which, kind of series of first. I'm in the first cohort of our Africana Studies PhD program. And so we're kind of evolving along with the Center for Slavery and Justice. So I think these kinds of events are kind of paramount importance for us to do exactly what Professor Bogues is saying, structure a series of relationships amongst this institution and other graduate students and you guys' institutions and thinking. So I'm hoping that this will be, one of a series of conversations that we get to have that are in that vein. Also, we'll have to track down the Center for Slavery and Justice. If you guys, as scholars of and stories of slavery, I mean, it's not outside of the realm of importance for our thinking to remember at Brown University the legacy of slavery at this institution, right? And the slavery report that the Center for Slavery and Justice produced just this week, the author of Ebony and Ivy was here, and he characterized it as being probably the most important document produced on slavery in recent memory. And his only concern with that document is that other universities had not taken up that mantle and done the same thing, right? It kind of exists, and it makes it seem as if Brown exists as a unique situation with respect to its relationship with slavery, when in fact, this is what was going on kind of everywhere. So, I'd encourage everyone to get a copy of that document if you haven't seen it already. And I think it'll help inform your thinking and the way we're setting up this conference. So over the course, just logistically, we'll use this area here for our presentations. You'll see a series of graduate students who are helping this morning. The first is Karita Brown from the Sociology Department, who will help moderate The second session will be Brandeis Monk Payton from Modern Culture and Media. And so we have a tremendous amount of support from other students who are also helping with this. And, you know, and I appreciate the thanks from Professor Bogues, but my grandmother told me that 90% of this stuff is just showing up, right? So once you put it kind of out there, kind of got its own momentum, it wouldn't have worked without Shana Weinberg is a tremendous administrator, and a lot of the stuff that seems, I'd like it to seem like it was way more difficult than it is, but I really appreciate you guys as you know, as actually being the catalyst for getting this done. I mean, I looked at the website and was really excited to see just the number of papers we were getting back and the diversity of interest. So this was a really great opportunity, and I really appreciate you guys for giving us this chance. It's the first time we're doing this, right? It's not a known conference or something like that. So, and I want to find out from you guys how you found out about it so I can make sure that we continue to mine those kinds of networks. So all that being said, I think we'll try to start on time. We'll take the next half hour or so and start these kinds of like localized conversations I think are important. People can get something to eat, and then we'll start at exactly 10 o'clock as planned. And looking forward to it. Thank you.